Greetings, friends. You are on the channel of Ruslan Belov, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of September 7th, 2025. A large number of events have taken place today, so let's get started. For the first time, the Russian side carried out a strike on a bridge, the Kyiv Bridge, located near the town of Kremenchuk. These are the very frames being published today by pro-Ukrainian sources. Apparently, in these shots, we can see Ukrainian fishermen who are on the banks of the Dnipro River, and at some point, they began recording the approaching sound of a Russian Garand-type drone. And in these very frames, we can see the first explosions. The strike was carried out by a Garand-type drone. Apparently, there were two strikes. This morning, a photo of this bridge, the Kyiv Bridge, was also published. As you can see, the bridge was not destroyed, but it was clearly damaged. Sources report that the lower structure of the bridge, which would normally rise to allow ships to pass along the Dnipro, was damaged and no longer functions. It is difficult to say how accurate this information is. On the other hand, this was the first time a bridge was targeted. The strike seemed to be a kind of test strike, measuring, aiming, perhaps even attempting to send a message to Zelensky, to Western countries, to foreign ministries, possibly even to MI6. Another important fact, this bridge was not chosen at random. It is located near Kremenchuk, and it is not just a road, bridge, but also a railway bridge. Strikes were directed against a settlement where the largest oil refinery is located, the Kremenchuk oil refinery. I remind you that in August, September, and July, the Russian side regularly struck this refinery. Explosions and damage were consistently recorded, and the Ukrainian side repeatedly complained that the plant was gradually being put out of operation. Therefore, the strike on the railway bridge was not just a symbolic message, but a loud and strategic one. Its main goal is to bleed out the refinery, depriving the Ukrainian side of sufficient fuel at a critical and decisive moment, preventing them from carrying out an effective defensive operation in the remaining part of the Donetsk region. This is no coincidence. According to experts, pro-Western, pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian alike, Russia is now moving into the stage of a final decisive battle, the grand battle for the remnants of the Donetsk region. At this point, all capable professional Russian forces have been concentrated in this direction, with one clear goal: to reach the administrative borders of Donetsk by the end of the year. This means that Russia must take control of such settlements as Pokrovsk, Mirnohrad, Kostiantynivka, Alexeyevka, Druzhkivka, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, Lyman, and of course, the town of Siversk. Possibly, it is precisely because of this larger strategy that strikes on bridges have begun, in order to deprive Ukraine of supplies, deliveries, and fuel at this historic moment. This is how Russia is preparing for its grand battle. Now let's discuss what has been happening along the front line. A lot of interesting news has been recorded. We begin with the Zaporizhzhia direction, more precisely, the eastern Zaporizhzhia area. The Russian armed forces continue their advance at this stage towards settlements such as Sosnivka, Velika Mikhailivka, Ternovi, and Berezove. Various cartographers, mainly pro-Ukrainian and neutral, record adjustments to the front line. We can see how the map has shifted over the last few days. The Vostok grouping is gradually advancing westward, clearing positions along the Volchya River and preparing positions around Ternov, Sosnivka, and Koroshe. Today, in fact, affiliated telegram channels of the Vostok grouping published posts stating that Russian units had approached the northern outskirts of Ternov, and possibly today or tomorrow, the village will be cleared by Russian forces. There are also reports of fierce fighting in Sosnivka. The Vostok grouping continues moving westward, aiming for the R85 highway, which connects Pokrovsk with Huliaipol. If this road is cut, Huliaipol could fall within days. Footage is also being published of airstrikes on temporary deployment points, mainly against positions of the 31st Mechanized Brigade, which plays the main defensive role in this sector. Next, we move to the Pokrovsk sector of the front, where fierce battles continue both east of Mirnohrad and in the breakthrough zone. Starting with the eastern part, today, Ukrainian sources published objective control footage showing strikes on Russian equipment that had recently attempted to push toward Mirnohrad. Based on earlier footage, analysts had already mapped the situation. Now, new footage from different angles shows abandoned Russian equipment right on the approaches to the settlement. The equipment was destroyed. All these episodes were recorded here, and many cartographers, pro-Russian and neutral alike, updated their maps accordingly. But in truth, it is still too early to draw solid conclusions. The area remains chaotic, with control shifting meter by meter between Russian forces and the Ukrainian army. One thing is clear: intense fighting is underway. In the salient, the Ukrainian side is counterattacking with all available strength. We can already discern their general plan. Some cartographers report that over the past 24 hours, Ukraine managed to fully recapture the village of Vladimirovka, which Russia's Ministry of Defense had claimed weeks ago. Ukrainian forces are also advancing into Zaporizhzhia, where they control at least 40% of the settlement. Footage, though archival from late August, shows Ukrainian counterattacks in Zaporizhzhia using armored vehicles. Overall, the intent appears clear. Ukrainian units are trying to move through Zaporizhzhia toward Mayak, while also advancing from Kharkiv, Vladimirovka, Pankivka, and Mayak. Mayak seems to be the final goal. A pincer attack from east and west could cut off Russian forces currently around Kharkiv Yar. The Russian side, of course, reports on these Ukrainian counterattacks. And while Ukraine is striking, we should understand that these counterattacks are targeting Russian-held positions that were originally Ukrainian fortifications built since 2020. These strongpoints are now in Russian hands. Ukraine's elite brigades are taking catastrophic losses, trying to contain the Russian breakthrough. Time is now on Russia's side. Although the picture may not look favorable at first glance, the Russian army is entrenched defensively, stabilizing the front line and even expanding control, while Ukrainian forces counterattack across open ground under Russian FPV drone strikes. The grand battle is gaining momentum. Next, we move to the Kostiantynivka sector, more precisely, the Siversk-Lyman axis. Since early morning, reports have stated that Siversk is under massive artillery fire. Some sources claim this is not just shelling, but full-scale artillery preparation. A general Russian offensive on this sector could begin today or tomorrow, with the goal of storming Siversk, breaking Ukrainian defenses, and advancing toward the M03 highway and Sloviansk. Pro-Ukrainian sources report that Russia has established a deadly kill zone near the M03. Russian drones are flying here in large numbers. The main Ukrainian logistical artery is under heavy Russian fire control. Daily footage shows military and civilian vehicles being destroyed by Russian drones along this route. Judging by the tone and content of Ukrainian posts, they clearly did not expect such a bold drone raid on this highway. The depth and range of these strikes are impressive. Depending on whether the drones are launched from Bakhmut or Soledar, the distance is about 30 kilometers. From the Zherebets River area, safe positions would be at least 30 kilometers away. This suggests something new. Some sources report that Russia is using mother drones, large UAVs carrying dozens of smaller FPV drones. These mothers maintain stable communications and allow the smaller drones to strike deep into enemy territory and hit major supply routes. Perhaps today we are witnessing the very technological breakthrough we spoke of just days ago, the kind of leap that could radically change the entire special military operation, the entire war whenever one side manages to gain a decisive technological edge. It is possible we are seeing that shift right now. Moreover, according to pro-Russian experts, neutral observers, and pro-Western analysts, the armed forces of the Russian Federation are currently fighting their way into the settlement of Yampol, which is located precisely at the junction of the Siversk and Lyman sectors of the front. It is in this direction that Russian units are now advancing, attempting to drive a wedge between the defensive stronghold of Lyman-Siversk in order to subsequently strike the rear of the Lyman grouping from the southeast and the rear of the Siversk grouping from the northwest. If Russian forces succeed in advancing toward Yampol, there is a very high probability that the defense in this sector will begin to collapse at a geometric rate. At the same time, Russian units continue their advance towards settlements such as Derelov, Novoselivka, and Drobyshev. Assault operations are also underway toward the village of Stavki, while Russian troops attempt to bypass the settlement of Zarekne from the northwest. Overall, speaking of this direction, there is a very interesting detail here, one that is uncharacteristic for the Russian army. let us take a look at how the offensive developed over the past several days. This large, powerful breakthrough began roughly on September 1st to 3. It was precisely in these days that cartographers began marking the map literally on a daily basis, with significant changes. Just yesterday, the first footage of objective control appeared, confirming that the Russian army has taken control of the dam between Novoselka and Derelov. Here, Ukraine's Third Army Corps is attempting to counterattack Russian positions at the junction of these settlements, striking at close range against Russian positions. There is also confirmation of partial control over Shandryholov and Derelov. And here is the interesting moment observed in recent days: the situation around Shandryholov. Notice that neither the Russian Ministry of Defense, nor Ukrainian media, nor various cartographers and geolocation references have provided a clear picture of what exactly is happening in the village of Shandryholov. By all indications, the settlement remains under firm control of the Russian armed forces. Yet at the same time, we clearly see that Russian units have not fixated on Shandryholov, but instead continued moving south toward Derelov, Drobyshev, Stavki, and Novoselivka. This is, in fact, one of the first such cases during the entire special military operation, likely carried out by the Zapad group of forces, where we can clearly observe the Russian army encircling an entire settlement, yet not stopping, not focusing on clearing it, essentially leaving a Ukrainian garrison behind and moving further toward Drobyshev, perhaps with the same goal of blocking it and again continuing forward. This represents a new type of situation where the Russian army does not necessarily finish clearing a settlement before advancing to the next one. Now the settlement is blocked, possibly with a couple hundred Ukrainian troops inside, and the Russians continue moving forward. This may indicate either a change in overall approach, not wasting time on battles for small villages, instead simply blocking them completely and pushing onward. Or it reflects a broader countdown. The Russian army must advance, and in such cases they no longer pay attention to such details, pushing further regardless. I assume that over time the situation may resolve itself, either through a siege where Ukrainian units run out of ammunition, or they are forced to retreat. In other words, we can see a timing, a countdown has begun. The Russian army is advancing, sometimes without fully finishing intermediate stages. This may be an element of new tactics, or simply a matter of deadlines. Everyone is rushing, which is especially noticeable in the Lyman and Siversk sectors. The Ukrainian side is desperately trying to stabilize the situation, redeploying additional units, attempting to establish a new defensive line along the Nitrus River. However, here we observe intense work by Russian FPV drone operators, destroying all Ukrainian equipment already near the settlements of Yarova and Oleksandrivka, and this already moves us toward the Izium direction. Next, let's turn to the northeastern part of Kharkiv region. After the Ukrainian side was forced to withdraw units from this sector to the Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka sectors in order to stabilize the front line, the Russian army once again breathed fully in this direction. Over the past several days, Russian advances in the northeast have been noted again, along with strikes near the settlement of Katne. Strikes are being delivered with TOS-1A Sontsepiok thermobaric systems. Here too, in the near future, one should expect very active Russian offensives. Effectively, the Ukrainian command has sacrificed the entire northeastern part of Kharkiv region in favor of defending Donetsk region. The idea appears to be that, while the Russian army advances, slowly but still faster, in the Veliki Burluk and Bilokolozivka directions, the time gained will allow Ukraine's fire brigades to stabilize the situation during the decisive battle for the remaining part of Donetsk region. Meanwhile, reports are coming in of active fighting near Sinkivka and the Sinkivka forests. Today, cartographers, following reports from the Sever group of forces, have marked large territorial gains east and west of Vovchansk. A large part of the forest area is already under Russian control. The first reports have also emerged that Russian forward units have begun fighting inside the village of Sinelnikova. Here too, a breakthrough should be expected. We see that in the northeast of Kharkiv region, the Russian side is advancing from at least 3 directions. One thing is clear: in the coming days, we will be witnessing many significant events connected with Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and all the best to you.